So who am I? My name's Kenton McDaniel. I love hacking things. I love cracking passwords. I get super excited about cracking passwords, so I tend to talk really fast and get way too excited about it. I was top 10 on hashes.org, if any of you are familiar with that, back before it went away. It was a password cracking enthusiast kind of community site where you would grab word lists, crack the passwords, and recontribute for new word lists. I had a 95% positive non-dupe rate, which is pretty good. So I love cracking passwords. My favorite question I've ever been asked throughout my information security career is if I've ever heard of Metasploit. I was on a call with some clients and they asked me if I've ever heard of it because they didn't think I knew what I was talking about. I have in fact heard of Metasploit. I've used it a time or two. So this is me and two memes. So you can just take a look at those real quick. So I want to cover a couple of the terms that I'm going to be talking about when we talk about cracking passwords. The first one is our key space. Our key space is the total set of possible characters within the space of a password that could be created. So we need to think about our key space when we're talking about how we're going to address cracking the passwords. And a hash is a cryptographic output of a function that generates a fixed length. And that length is different depending on the hashing algorithm. But it takes in whatever the input is and generates a fixed length based on that input. So it could be a file, it could be some text. It'll generate a fixed length output based on the input. And the ideas that I want to address are password cracking is approachable for everybody. Anybody who needs to crack passwords can. You can craft your approach so that you can get the maximum output from your password cracking. And it's not just pure brute forces, it's not just dictionary attacks. You want to have a consistent approach that you can follow that will give you good gains for your output on your password cracking. And then once you've cracked those passwords, cycle them back into your word lists. Reuse the passwords that you've cracked to get even more cracks in the future, or even to go back against your initial dump of password hashes. So utilizing the information that you have beforehand, utilizing the information that you gain during your cracking runs, combining that all together to get a higher crack rate. A lot of times when I talk to other penetration testers, other red teamers, the idea is we ship off the passwords, they get cracked by the org, any passwords that come back from those hashes I used, right? And that's not a bad approach, but we can do better. We can do better than just ship it off to the password cracking box and get back whatever we get. Let's be better and let's get more cracks. And let's tailor it more specifically to our client as well. A couple of clarification points. When you're cracking a password, you never actually recover the original plain text of a hash. Cryptographic hashes by nature are one way only. You will never recover the original plain text, but what you will do is generate a hash that has the same plain text with enough confidence to say that that is the cryptographic hash, right? So you put in the same plain text and it gives you the same result within a degree of confidence. And this is important for salted functions, right? Like bcrypt, scrypt. So within a degree of confidence for you to say, yes, this is the original plain text. The more GPUs you have, the better time you're going to have. But the approach that I'm taking is a single GPU. So a single GPU, you can recover hard to crack passwords. We should all be familiar with password strength meters. They're pretty common in the industry. A lot of people say, go look at a password strength meter. It'll tell you if your password's good or not. Or we may even use them in our orgs, right? We may say, okay, go out to this password strength meter. We put it in our AD environment to gauge the strength of your password. We want to crack those passwords, right? But password strength meters are bad, and they should feel bad. They are based solely on length and relative complexity, not based on how we as humans can figure out how to crack passwords better. So, for example, this password it said would take 2 months to crack. In reality, it'd probably take about 10 seconds to crack. They just don't know how to efficiently gauge what the real strength of a password is, right? And so then this one, it says my passwords take 3 years. Well, that's not true. It's in an already known dump of passwords in plain text. So the last one is this one. Has anyone ever seen this password before? Got some ex-KCD fans out there, right? So passphrases, right? Everyone's saying, well, use passphrases. Well, Passphrases are cool, but most English words exist in most dictionaries. And so if I have those English words in my dictionary, I can use what's called a combinator attack to build combination word lists from English dictionaries, stretch out my key space, and get passphrases. So if you're saying 4 or 5, so the practical limit for me with my single GPU is 5 words. So at that practical limit, so if you go 6 words, due to my hardware constraints, I'm not going to get your password. At 5 words, I am going to get your password if you're just chaining together dictionary words, even if you're using separators with those dictionary words. I'll get your password. It's a function of time and investment, right? So if you include character substitutions, that can make it a little bit more difficult. But if you do like character substitutions of like 3 for an E, that's way too easy to get. It's too normal of a character substitution. So we can go over and over and we can rag on password strength meters all day, but that's not what we're here for. So the 2 tools that I use the most are Hashcat and John the Ripper. I prefer Hashcat, but I still use John the Ripper occasionally if the algorithm is not supported by Hashcat. So I have a full list of my preferred word lists, rules, and this methodology out on my GitHub. It's at github.com, Jerry Blanks, and password cracking methodology. That's not my real name. You probably noticed. That's my alias, right? So that's my GitHub where I have my password cracking methodology, the words I like to use, and hilariously, rocku.txt, if any of you are familiar with it, is still going strong. It's still my go-to word list all the time. Use rocku.txt first. People don't change. Use rocku.txt first and then expand onto your more complex ones. Different hashing algorithms have differing times to crack. So for our blue teams, right, for our defenders, use the strongest password hashing algorithm that you can. Always choose salted over non-salted. Use those strong algorithms because it takes longer to crack. And at some point, you give up, right? So if I'm going against bcrypt and I've already been running the cracking job for 4 days, I'm probably going to give up at day number 5, depending on how bad I really want that hash. Always use salted. The more rounds, the better. So we're going to benchmark my cracking rig and see how quickly we can do some common hash algorithms. So it's an Ubuntu box, and it's a single RTX 2080 Super. So that's something that should be approachable for most people. It's not bleeding edge GPU, but it's a nice GPU, right? But it's just one. So just a single RTX 2080 Super. And here you can see my crack rates. So the top one is, of course, NTLM, which is unsalted. Thanks, Microsoft. So NTLMs, I'm going to crack them real fast. Everything else, it kind of descends, right? You get to the bottom and it's bcrypt. Yeah, it's pretty slow. So there's different approaches. Brute forcing, dictionary, mask, and hybrid. I'm going to talk a little bit about all of these. And our source that we get for these is Have I Been Owned? Is anybody familiar with Have I Been Owned? They offer you their entire data set as NTLMs if you want it. And you don't even have to ask, it's just on the website. So just so you know, if you ever want all of the NTLMs that Have I Been Owned has, they will give them to you. So I went out and grabbed 1,000 NTLMs from Have I Been Owned. I will not show the passwords because these poor passwords are not very great, so I won't show them. We'll protect their innocence. So brute forcing is attempting all characters within an expanded key space forever. The pros are given enough time and resources, you'll eventually crack the hash. The cons, given enough time and resources, you'll eventually crack the hash. So it could take a very, very long time, and that's not practical, right? We want to talk about practical password cracking. So I don't have any slides about brute forcing because it's not efficient, it's not practical. Dictionary attacks. So the idea is you use a set of predefined words that could be previously leaked passwords, they could be passwords you've recovered in other ways. So you use this dictionary to try to generate guesses against the hash that you have. And then you can augment that with rules. You can augment it with other things. We're just going to talk about dictionary and rules real quick. So the pros are it's very flexible and it's very fast. You can swap out your dictionaries relatively easy. It's incredibly quick to go. The cons are your key space is still limited because you're only limited by what the transform of the rules allows you to do, and you're limited by what is in your dictionary. So using a dictionary, I've already cracked passwords. So for example, my methodology would be use rocku first, right? Rocku.text first, then use rocku plus best64 rule, then use rocku plus 1 rule, and then switch over to hashkiller, which is another dictionary. Then use hashkiller plus best64, hashkiller plus 1 rule. So rotate your dictionaries, rotate your rules so that you cover as much of the possible key space as you can while still having a relatively fast attack. So password cracking rules are just a static set of transforms that you can apply against a dictionary that will perform functions on the words inside of the dictionary. So we'll see here nothing and then reverse it. So password gets flipped, right? Uppercase everything, and then simple number appends at the bottom. So these rules are designed to help you get permutations against your dictionaries. Those permutations on your dictionaries can then get you more cracks, which you then cycle back into your dictionaries. So you crack the passwords, cycle those back in, run those again with more permutations on the ones that you've cracked. So what happens is, especially when you're talking about things that are community type things, like a website that has a community feeling where everybody is into that one thing that website is all about, right? Like, let's say it's a forum for a popular game. A lot of those people's passwords might be based on things from that game, right? And so if I can get a couple of the passwords, I can start seeding my word list with those passwords and then applying more transforms and more rules, and that's going to get me a greater crack yield because there's a community there, right? And the same thing can be said about organizations. There's a community inside of that organization. There's a community inside of that organization, and so you know that once you get the first couple of cracks, you can get a greater yield by cycling those words back through your word lists and appending more guesses with the rules. So dictionary attack. First dictionary attack I did was, again, our data set's 1,000, right? So I just ran it through rocku. Hilariously, we got 23 out of 1,000. That's a pretty good recovery rate for a dictionary that's pretty old. I can't remember exactly when rocku was leaked, but it's a pretty old dictionary, but we still got a good recovery rate. So now we're going to add some rules to it. And look at the crack time, but the time that it took, by the way, 2 seconds. So without single GPU, you can go through 1,000 NTLMs in 2 seconds. That's pretty fast. Same single GPU, now we're adding what I believe to be the most comprehensive password cracking rule out there. It's called 1 rule to rule them all. I have a link to it on my GitHub. So you add that to rocku. We went up to 5 minutes and 22 seconds, and we got 443. So we're almost halfway, right? We almost have half of those 1,000 passwords just with rocku and 1 rule. Now we're going to talk about masks. So a mask is a defined character set defined by defined by 2 characters, right? So what we're saying is a mask is a representation of an entire character space that you can fit to append or prepend or use solely as a password cracking attack. So $U is uppercase alpha, $L is lowercase alpha, D is digits, S is special characters, and A is everything. So you can use these masks as substitutions or appends with your dictionaries or by themselves to get a better yield on your password cracking. So for example, we've got this one. As we can see, it's 9 lowercase, right? Oh, and by the way, if you're noticing the recovered is always low, it's because what I did is I went and cleared my pot file. What Hashcat does is it stores all the passwords you've cracked is in what's called a pot file for you to go back and recycle like I've been talking about. I cleared my pot file. That's why, so each recovery percentage that you see, is based solely on the one thing we're doing right then. So I noticed it when I was making this slide, so I thought some of you might notice it as well. So just doing 9 lowercase alpha got us 17. So not super great, right? We changed that around to 9 characters, but we did upper, lower, digit, and that got us 55. So you can take, and it's really quick, 17 seconds to go through that entire key space that we've defined and looking for things. So for example, if we did, what season is it now? It's fall, right? So if we did fall 2020 special, that's 8 characters, we can go through that in probably about 10 seconds, right? And we can even stretch that key space even more by adding more lowers if they're using autumn. So we can use mask attacks for really quick if we think it fits within the defined key space that we know about. So we can use mask attacks for really quick attacks, also like company name, right? So Acme Corp. We can do Acme Corp 1 exclamation point. We can do that all through masks. We could even just do Acme and then a mask appended to it or prepended to it. You can use your masks for flexibility for really quick attacks that will get you hashes really fast that you can then put back into your dictionaries, cycle through, and crack some more. So a hybrid attack is utilizing a mask and a dictionary so that you can append or prepend it to your dictionary to get more cracks as well. The cons here are it's restricted to augmenting your guesses within a certain key space. So you're augmenting your guesses, but depending on what you define your key space as with the mask, you're restricted to that key space. So for example, we did on this one, rock you on the left side, right? So the rock you word first, and then appended to it, I did 2 digits. And that only still took 2 seconds. And it was 54, so better than just our run with rock you. And then I took it and I prepended the 2 digits to rock you and got 54, so not great. So you can append, you can prepend, you can put it anywhere on either side of the dictionary if you think you want to stretch the key space in a defined manner. And then this one is like that attack I was talking about. If you want to do like season, year, it's easy to do. You can even build your own word list of seasons, build your own word list of companies, build your own word list of professional baseball teams that you can then append or prepend your masks to and get incredibly quick performance, 0 seconds. It didn't even register as having taken time to try to crack it, and I got 55 passwords. So it's faster than RockU and better recovery rate. Because I diminished the key space, right? I said the key space is small enough that Hashcat was able to go through it incredibly quickly. Because humans do things with predictable patterns. So it's kind of like if you're going to socially engineer someone, you don't use the same pretext for everybody, right? Same thing with cracking passwords. Don't use the same methodology, same dictionaries for everybody, because people are different. People are going to be different based off of where you get your hashes from. Purple rain attacks. I'm not going to dig into purple rain attacks. If you ever want to, it's really fun to watch it go. Hashcat will build custom dictionaries, rules, and masks on the fly for you. And it will throw those, not Hashcat, but the Purple Rain preprocessor will build these on the fly, throw them at Hashcat for you, and you can watch some of those more difficult hashes come in. This takes a long time to run, by the way. It's very resource intensive, takes a long time to run, but it's pretty cool to watch the guesses fly through. So I talked a little bit about a pop file. So the beauty of a pop file is you want to recycle that as early and as often as possible. You always want to have your pop file be your source for where you get your new lists. So you'll have your static lists, and sometimes new word lists get released. If you watch, if you know where to look, word lists come out fairly frequently. There's a new RockU 2021. It's okay. The original RockU still has the same recovery rate in my experience, so I haven't switched because the new RockU is like twice the size, so it's slower but not a better recovery rate. So you can look out for new ones, but your best source of more guesses is your pop file. So recycle it back in with more masks and more combinations. So what does this all mean? If we want to be safe, we're hoping that people that build the software that we use the strongest algorithms possible. But we can't count on that, right? We can't count on the people that we are giving passwords to using the strongest algorithm possible. And if you're cracking passwords, update your word list frequently. Use your pop file. Find new mask combinations that you can use. Go out and join some of the password cracking communities that exist and get more ideas. Don't just rely on one fixed set of dictionaries that I use and that's it. We can do better. We can crack more. We can recover more. Identify your client and identify their users. I talked a little bit about this. Know who you're trying to crack. The more you know about them, the better you can recover their passwords. So the standard strategy is, for me, is something like this. Take a dictionary, run it through. Dictionary plus a rule, dictionary plus another rule, maybe I'll go one more, and then I'll switch to another dictionary, plus one rule, plus another rule, plus another, and you repeat that on down based on your own recovery rate, based on your own speed and processing power. And then if it's a tailored strategy, right, then you build your custom word lists. And building custom word lists, a lot of people are like, just use Crunch and build a word list of every single possible character combination. I mean, storage is cheap, but not that cheap. Don't make Crunch build an entire word list of every single alphanumeric character combination that there is. We're not aiming for rainbow tables. We're aiming for good word lists that get us through quickly. Don't trust anyone. So if you have a password, don't trust anyone with it. So in an ideal world, everyone's using salting and everyone's hashing passwords, but they might not be. So use a password manager with a minimum length of 36. That's my recommendation. If you want to have confidence that your password will be relatively safe from being cracked, use a password manager to generate it. Don't generate them yourself. Use a password manager to generate it. 36 should be your minimum length that you will give to anyone, anywhere. And I'm even talking about your AD. So use a password manager for your Active Directory, 36 characters. Especially if you're highly privileged. I'm assuming since you're at this conference, you have some level of privilege. That's my recommendation. And use MFA for everything. That way, when your password is cracked, it's only one step of the process, right? So always use MFA. And my master password recommendation, I'm going to even go a little bit more crazy. I would say I would recommend at least 24 to 36 for your master password for your password manager. And a lot of people are going to think I'm crazy. It helps, right? Because you can recover the hash of your master password from pretty much every password manager that exists. If you're using a client-based one, there are tools that will extract the hash from it, and then it's just a matter of once you crack the hash for the master password of the password management software, then I have all your passwords, right? In an easily consumable state and easy to use. I flew through that pretty quick. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
For users, what would you recommend if can use a password manager? Say like for logging into Windows, for just normal users for like a password policy. What would you recommend?
So the question was, what would I recommend for logging into Windows, right? Like normal user password policy. And people are going to think I'm absolutely nutty. I still recommend at least 24 characters with complexity requirements, maybe 36 depending on the sensitivity of what your organization does, and password books. If your users can't remember their password, if we're saying, okay, no user's going to remember a password that long, get them a book. Because now what we're talking about is we're going to talk about a physical intrusion versus just someone phishing us or someone getting in through a single factor VPN. To me, you have to identify your own threat model. My personal threat model for physical intrusion is much, much lower than it is for digital intrusion. So I would recommend a password book, somewhere where you write that password down. And don't leave it as a sticky note on your monitor. That's not great, but have it in a book somewhere that you use. That's better than having your password just be your favorite pet's name, right? So get a book, write it down somewhere that's relatively safe, but also, again, figure out your own threat model, because that's a tough one, right? If your threat model has physical intrusion on it, then that's tough. Then you got to push down to the users and say, no, physical intrusion is in our threat model. You got to remember that length of password. And it could even go 36 characters, but I don't care if it's just a bunch of words strung together. Because once we reach 36 characters, that becomes a lot tougher to crack. Anybody else have any other? Yeah.
Have you heard anything about threat actors pooling their work?
The question was, have I heard anything about threat actors pooling their work? So there's the idea of collaborative hash cracking, and yes, they do. Because why wouldn't they, right? And how they pool their work is publishing word lists, right? So you publish these word lists and you publish these leaks that have these word lists in them, and now everybody has the word list, everybody has the passwords, so that the next time you go to use them, they're already in your word list. And if you just go look, people are selling credentials as well. But the idea is, yes, they are going out there, sharing the credentials, sharing the hashes, and sharing the word lists. Any other questions? Thank you very much for your time.